Okay, I am obsessed with my kids' pajamas, which is why I was really excited to find Sleepy Drew, a family-owned small business where comfort meets styles for moms and their little ones. Their adorable pajamas come in 2-piece sets or zip-ups, and they're cozy, durable, and even have antibacterial properties. Designed by a mom with moms in mind, Sleepy Drew brings warmth and joy to your family's sleep routine. Visit sleepydrew.com and you can receive a 15% discount on your first order by using the code QUIETConnection, all one word, at checkout. Shop now and make bedtime the best time with Sleepy Drew. Hi, welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today, I'm connecting with Danielle, who shares about the challenges she faced in building a support network as a first-time mom. We explore how a late-in-life autism spectrum disorder diagnosis has impacted her approach to parenting, as well as the benefits and challenges that come along with being in a polyamorous relationship. The thread that weaves this all together is the need for community and support throughout the entire parenting experience. Let's hear from Danielle. Hello. Today I am here with Danielle. Danielle, how are you?
I'm doing really well today. I'm a little tired. It's that time of year, but
It is.
it's like I'm in Colorado. It's nice and blue outside, which always perks my mood right up.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Are you in the part of Colorado that gets like a bunch of snow?
Not too much. I'm right between Boulder and Denver, so we do
Okay.
have snow on the ground right now, but it's not very much. It's just barely. I'm looking out my window. Sorry,
Yeah.
It's barely visible. Yeah,
That's cool. I'm based in Vermont, and we've already got snow. Yeah. But I've always wanted to go to Colorado. My partner's been to Colorado, and he just loves it. But I just don't want to be near the snow. So that's why I ask. I'm like, what part are you? I want to get away from the snow.
Yeah. No, I'm from New Jersey originally, and I really miss it. I liked the culture of New Jersey better, but Colorado is beautiful.
Yeah.
And we have 300 days of sunshine a year. So compared to when I lived in New Jersey and it was kind of dour outside a lot of the time,
yeah,
I do like the weather a little bit more out here. Yeah.
Maybe someday we'll make our way out there, but we'll see. So you are also a podcast host. You have your own podcast called Neurodivergent, and you are a mama. And I could list all the things that I wrote down about you, but why don't I just ask you if you could sort of introduce yourself and then also tell us a little bit about who you were before becoming a parent.
Sure. Well, so right now I am a podcast host of Neurodiverging. I was just joking with a friend the other day that we should start a second sillier podcast called Neurodiverging. So when you said it the other way, I was like, yeah,
yes,
it is not as easy to say. But I started that podcast right before the pandemic, I guess, because one of my children, we're a neurodivergent family. So we have lots of different kinds of brains in our family. And when my first child was diagnosed autistic, right after, like within the year after that, I was diagnosed autistic as an adult in my early 30s. I'm like, what year is it? What time is it? And so I started this podcast in part because I felt very alone in that. It was very difficult to find other human adults who had a late diagnosis of something like that and were also parenting children who are neurodivergent. So I started the podcast, and that's evolved now into like a whole coaching practice where we work with mostly late identified autistic, ADHD, and otherwise neurodivergent adults and do a lot of parenting stuff there. So that's kind of who I am now. As a parent, I have 2 kiddos I got this wrong the other day in a parent meeting because they keep growing, but they're 10 and 8 now. And before I was a parent, I became a parent right after I finished grad school, my master's program. I think my son was born, and then I brought him to whatever the ceremony was when he was 4 weeks old.
Oh my gosh.
I was trying to write my thesis while I was pregnant, and I was like, oh, it'll be easy. And then I was just so spacey and weird. So I had I kind of met my partner in this space where I was trying to figure out, I had finished my undergrad degree and I was working as a server at a restaurant and as a medical assistant, a couple other sort of trying to figure out what you want to do jobs, the kinds you get right after school. Because I got a liberal arts degree and I really enjoyed it, but I also couldn't really find, this was in 2007. There weren't a lot of jobs at the time. I was in Philadelphia, and I met my partner and I decided to apply to grad school. We moved to Colorado. And then it was kind of like an age thing where he's 6 years older than me, which is not a huge difference, but I was already in my mid 20s and I was kind of like, I should probably have babies when I'm closer to 30 than when I'm 40. You can, in retrospect, it's really clear that I'm an autistic person because I think a certain way. But at the time, I just didn't know. I was like, it'll be easier if I have babies when I'm younger. And also, I want to have my babies close together so that I can get all the hard stuff done first, which I'm glad of now that they're 8 and 10. But in the time was awful. It was terrible. So I really was trying to figure out like, okay, we're going to move to Colorado. I'm going to do my grad school and then I'm going to have kids. And then we'll figure out the next step after that. So that was kind of the thought process. In terms of who I was, I think I was not totally formed yet as a human being, as silly as that sounds, but I was in my early 20s. I was an undiagnosed autistic ADHDer, which now that I know more about that, a lot of my challenges make a lot more sense. But at the time, I felt I had trouble making friends and keeping friends. I'm a good worker, but I need people to communicate with me directly. And a lot of work culture is not direct. And so I would achieve the things I was directly asked to achieve very, very well, but I didn't always get the social norms. And I did a lot better in New Jersey than I do in Colorado because the norms in New Jersey, New York are much more direct than in Colorado, where people are more like polite in the way that you don't really know if they're telling you what they want you to know. I had a lot of depression and anxiety. I had like just a lot of social challenges going on that in retrospect were undiagnosed autism and executive function issues that now I have like interventions for or scaffolding for or support for, but I just didn't when I was younger. And I think I had all these ideas about what being a parent would be like. And I did my research, I read 20 books while I was pregnant or something.
Oh my gosh.
But then I had the baby and it's like, well, now life is very different and very hard. And it was a big change. And I think I almost think of having my first kiddo, but then also I had them close together as like the crucible through which I was formed, which is kind of sad because it makes me sound like I wasn't a human before. And obviously I was, but I think a lot of my strengths were really developed through having kids and then figuring out how to be a human that I liked being while also supporting these kids, in the way that I wanted to as a parent. So, yeah.
That's so it's so cool to me, the common threads that I hear when I talk to different parents who come from so many different backgrounds, but like, and the person I was talking to this morning in another recording session, it's the same thing. It's like, it's the birth and rebirth through becoming a parent. Like you're not just birthing your child, you're birthing a new version of yourself. And for some people that's really, really hard because you don't know who this person is. For some people it's like a really beautiful experience. For some people it's challenging, but the commonality between all of us is that we become a parent and we're not the same. We're like, you have to figure out who you are. So you're not alone in that. And the other thing that's totally not parent related at all, but I feel like, we fall within the same generation, I think, like millennial, elder millennial. And a lot of us are being diagnosed as adults with autism or ADHD. But it's becoming this sort of thing that I don't want to overgeneralize, but a lot of us are being diagnosed as adults.
It's very common. It's really common.
And it explains a lot, I feel like. Like you were saying, like it explains your thinking a little bit. You look back on it and you're like, oh my God, What if I had known that when I was
Yeah.
younger?
Hmm.
Like, what kind of a difference would that have made? So I just think it's fascinating that for some reason our generation is booming with all of these. We are not neurotypical people, but I think that's what makes us
Yeah.
exciting.
I hope so. I I think I mean I work primarily with late identified neurodivergent people, so my sense of how many of us are is highly skewed because they're literally the only people I talk to
That
in my
I'm a
day-to-day
special
life.
educator,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
like that's
exactly.
like yeah.
And but I do think there's something about like you were saying, becoming a parent reframes your whole identity and purpose and like belonging and place in life in one way. And also in a very different way, getting a late identification or whether you're self-assessed, like self-determining yourself or getting a medical assessment or whatever, um, is also this huge reframing of identity and re-understanding of identity. And a lot of clients come in after a diagnosis, at least in my coaching practice, and are in this process of sort of, well, they viewed their identification as sort of stripping away who they were before, because a lot of their expectations or understandings or frameworks of themselves were false or not useful or unhelpful, or and so they've stripped all that away and they're in the process of rebuilding almost from the ground up who they are. And that can be a hugely powerful and empowering process. In the same way, becoming a parent can, but in the same way, becoming a parent can be hugely difficult and open up challenges that you never knew even existed. I think the diagnosis process can be similar. And so having both those things kind of happen in a couple of short years from you was a really interesting. Oh, but like now I can look back at it and really say, wow, I really had to drop everything I was before almost completely, in a way that I still grieve sometimes, but also enabled this huge transformation into what I now consider to be a lot of my strengths as a human that were not able to be seen before because they were being covered up by all these other expectations that weren't really good fits for me. So yeah, it's a thing I think about a lot.
Yeah.
It's just being, I feel it's a mixed blessing, but I feel very lucky, I guess, to have had both those things happen in short um, time from one another. Because if they'd happened 10 years apart or 20 years apart, I don't know that I would have been so successful in rebuilding up and reframing, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and that kind of one of my questions was going to be, how did that late diagnosis impact your view of yourself as a parent?
Mhm.
But it sounds like they sort of happened so close together that I'm sure that it had an impact,
Mhm.
but you were developing both of those identities alongside each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My son was identified on, we knew from pretty early infanthood that he was probably autistic. He had a lot of the sort of developmental differences that you see with autistic kiddos. And so we got him evaluated, but I was like pretty sure what it was going to come back with. But the more research I did on what autistic traits looked like and all those kinds of, the more understanding I had of it as a neurotype, the more I realized like, oh, it was probably in our family. And the more I started seeing it in me specifically and in
Mm.
my family. And so the process of figuring out my kiddo was very much a process of figuring out myself. And then by the time he was identified, I think that my second kiddo was, I'm trying to remember, I think I was pregnant with her when we went through the initial process. And then I think, you know, that when we started going to therapies and stuff for my son, she was only a couple months old. So
Mm.
it happened. And in that whole time, I was reinterpreting myself because sort of a sidebar, but getting identified as an adult is a lot harder than identifying kiddos for lots of reasons, but especially if you're a woman, especially if you're older and a full adult, a lot of providers don't have the tools or resources or knowledge to, you know, so it's much harder to get a proper diagnosis as an adult. And so I was doing all this self work to try to figure out if it might be me, but it wasn't really easy to just walk into an office and say, hey, can you screen me? It required a lot more effort to get identified professionally, you know, though you can self-identify, of course, and that's very, very valid. So I was doing a lot of this self-identification work at like literally at the same time as I was birthing my second child, I was, trying to understand my son. I was trying to understand myself. It was all on top of each other. And in my memory, very enmeshed. I don't have the best memory to start with for lots of reasons, but it's really hard to separate out all those little threads. I think they're really kind of in a knot, in there where they're just, the one leads to the other.
Do you feel like that in some way was almost beneficial, or do you think that it made that identity shift more difficult?
Both.
Yeah. I don't like but, I like
no,
and.
It's
yeah.
both and.
Yeah.
I think I'm grateful for how it happened. At the same time, I think it was probably the most difficult way I could have possibly attempted to do things.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to, I had my babies, they're 22 months apart. They're both neurodivergent. They both had sleep challenges. I had nursing challenges with both of them. So I was kind of I was going to say I was a mess, which is not fair to me because I was doing my best, but it felt very discombobulated. I was very tired. My body was going all over the place. I had postpartum depression and anxiety with both of them. Just a lot of challenges altogether. My son had chronic ear infections leading up to the birth of my daughter, my second child. And so I hadn't slept even before I had her. And I think that's part of why it's kind of hard to remember that whole time, is because I was just kind of chronically tired. And I kind of lost where I was going, but I think that in some ways it was easier it's kind of like, that there's all this research on, it's easier to start a new habit when you totally shift your life. So you get married, you move house, it's easier to start a new exercise habit. And I kind of think of it like that. Like, it was easier for me to reframe, say, my autism or my neurotype because I was already transitioning into parenthood, right? And it was also easier to transition into parenthood because I was transitioning kind of my self-knowledge place. And so I think that they did feed into one another and make it easier overall. But also, I was extremely tired. I was anxious and depressed. I, was reframing my whole selfhood and my relationship with my partner and who I thought I was going to be and what I thought I was going to do. And also getting a diagnosis for a child is really challenging, even if you're neurodiversity affirming and you're strengths based. And even when they're lower support needs, I think my kids are sort of medium support needs. They're not particularly high support, but they also just can't be sent out, into the world.
Right.
So I'm their primary support person. And so it was like a lot at once. And it helped, again, kind of forge a very distinct personality for me and a distinct set of where are my strengths and where do I fit in. But it was not easy.
No.
And I don't know that I would hope, I wouldn't wish it on anyone else. It would have been much, much easier in a lot of ways if I'd had the one thing and then a couple of years and then the other thing in a couple of years.
No, that makes perfect sense. It does.
Yeah.
And I'm the type of, like, when you were saying, like, I forgot where I was going with this. I talk myself in circles all day long.
Oh, yes.
So I can follow your circles. It's okay.
I appreciate it. I am an autistic ADHDer, so I do a lot of podcasts, but also I think in a certain way, and I can't always filter as quickly as I would like to. So
I am here for it. I am bleh, see, I can't talk either. I do not have autism spectrum disorder, but that was my most passionate area of interest in working in special ed. I absolutely loved working with the autism community. And so your circles
used to us. You're used to the way we communicate.
Well, no, you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
No, we're a really diverse group.
Yes. But also I just I think what I love about the autism and the autistic community is that everyone is so unique, but communication is so much more diverse. It's not just this back and forth dialogue. Communication can be a look, communication can be a feeling, communication can be tactile, and I love that. So anyway, I'm whether this gets in the episode or not, this is just me sort of like gushing for a minute because I get to sort of bring my other passion into this a little bit. But yeah, don't ever worry about having the train go off the track or talking in circles.
It does what it does, you know. It does. Like, we're gonna try to give you the best effort I possibly can, and also I have the brain I have.
Yeah, exactly. No, my train leaves the track several times an hour, and somehow I make it through the day. So we'll see. So I know that you had mentioned that like you wanted to have your kids when you were like in a certain age. Did you always picture yourself becoming a parent? Was being a parent something that was always on your to-do list?
No, I felt very kind of open either way. And I think a lot of the decision making was that my partner really wanted kids. And I'm not non-monogamous, and we have been for many, many years. And I'd always thought, well, maybe he'll find another partner who will actually carry the babies and I can just parent. Because I was very interested in parenting, I guess. How's that? I was very interested I've always been interested in education as a field. I am somebody who likes to learn a lot. I had done babysitting, and I was like the religious education director at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship that I belonged to at the time. And I had done a lot of sort of sideways child development kind of things. And I was really interested in that aspect. But the actual like being pregnant and carrying a baby, and then the couple of first years where they're just really cute blobs, for me, the excitement of being a parent really kicks in when they're like 3-ish and they start to become little people. But the prior to little people point, where they're very beloved little blobs that need things from you all the time, I was not super interested in. And I think that at some point we just sort of realized like, hey, you know, he was about to hit 35, all the genetic studies about like, you know, challenges and stuff. And I was just kind of like, oh, I guess we should just do it now. Like I had this, I was going to graduate grad school, and it seemed like that would make the most sense practically. So that's kind of just what we did. And I think my prediction of how I would feel was right. Like I loved my babies when they were born, and also they weren't really interesting to me outside of things to take care of. That I wanted to be happy and well, but also were just like little, you know, until they started being little people. And my son was a late talker, so we didn't really get much out of him verbally until he was 4.5. But I remember when he, you know, turned 3-ish, 2.5, 3. He was 22 months when my daughter was born. And yeah, before she was 1 year old, I suddenly I felt like our attachment really clicked in a lot more, even though I had been nursing and like, you know, doing all the attachment parenting stuff. It was really when he started to be able to like see the world and communicate about it. And we could have sort of not conversations because he wasn't verbal, but we could interact about it together, that I really started to feel like, this is the parenting thing. This is kind of what I wanted out of having a family. Yeah. But when I was younger, it wasn't really something I thought about very much. I didn't think about partnering very much either, to be frank. Like it was just kind of like, I'm going to go into the world and see what happens and see what I like and do the things that seem like they make the most sense at the time. But I didn't really feel like I had a lot of, I was going to say autonomy, which isn't really true, but like, I think honestly, before I got my diagnosis, I have very slow processing. That's part of autism spectrum for some folks. And so information comes in and it takes me longer than a neurotypical person to understand what I'm seeing, understand what I'm feeling. I have auditory processing disorder. So noise that comes in takes a very long time for me to understand sometimes. And especially in busy environments or with a lot of people. And I think a lot of when I was younger, I really was just delayed, not in the sense of having a developmental delay, but delayed in the sense that it took me so much longer to figure out what I thought about stuff, that by the time I figured it out, the moment had passed. By the time I knew what I felt, the moment had passed. By the time I was ready to add to the conversation, the moment had passed. And so I spent a lot of my young adulthood kind of just trying to make stuff work as best I could, but not really feeling like I was on top of it, or I had, maybe that's the authority piece. I didn't really feel like I could control a lot of my life, because by the time the chance would have happened to say something or do something or change something, it would have been past. Now that I know what's going on, like neurologically, it's like, oh, okay, now I can like kind of address that. But I think I spent a lot of my young adulthood just sort of like trying to push through and not
Yeah.
really realizing that I shouldn't have to push through, that that was a sign that something was going wrong. And so a lot of like, well, did I want to be a parent? Did I want to do this career? Did I want to, it was kind of like, I will if it makes sense to do that. But I didn't really have strong feelings, because I might, like, despite what I felt, I might not be able to do it anyway. Because a lot of times there was a disconnect. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but there was a
Yeah.
disconnect between knowing what I wanted and being able to enact that in the world.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I just decided not to worry about what I wanted anyway, because I might not be able to enact it anyway. So again, knowing the autism piece really enabled me to say, oh, I can affect the world. I just needed these pieces to be put in their place so that I could make those decisions. So I was happy to become a parent, but I was also kind of like very neutral on it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that
So
makes sense.
a little bit of a complex answer, but yeah.
No, I totally tracked with it. But I feel like you weren't necessarily looking to put yourself into a box. You were just kind of like, we'll see when I get there. We'll see when I
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that also, I think, makes it sound like a more empowering decision than perhaps it was. Like, because I don't think part of being an undiagnosed person is that you want to be like everybody else, and you know you're not, but you can't really figure out where the disconnect is. And so I didn't want to commit to being a parent or not being a parent, because I might not be able to make that decision. I might like miss the chance either way. And so it felt less empowering than, I don't want to be put in the box, which feels to me anyway, like a very like, I'm choosing, right? I'm choosing to do it how I want to do it. And instead I felt like I actually want to do it the way you want to do it. I just can't quite figure out how to get in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very different post-diagnosis. I feel empowered to say, I want to do it this way. But when I was younger, I really just didn't have the tools or the perspective or the experience to feel confident saying, yes, I want this, because it might not matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also like, and I'm the type of person who like, I like to give people that power. Like I'll take what you say and I'll be like, no, but you were powerful and you were that. But no, but what you're saying really clarifies it for me, because it helps me to understand. Like I love that you have that sense of empowerment now, and that you know the tools to sort of help you navigate these situations. But yeah, like what a complex situation that must have been, like, to maybe want to get into the box but not know how or when, or like if, all of the
Yeah.
all of those
Yeah.
all of those words.
It's hard to explain too, because I don't know that it's something, I know there's plenty of people out there who have had similar experiences, but I don't think it's necessarily something that, like, you don't see movies about it. You don't read books about it. It's like having a different way of perceiving and understanding and organizing the world, having a different brain than most people around you and not knowing that. And having other people just assume that you have their kind of brain is a really disempowering experience. Like you can find power within it if you know, but if you don't know, and I think that's part of why getting the diagnosis was so empowering, and also so wrapped up in my parenthood, like who I am now, because, if I was that person still, like if I still didn't have a diagnosis and I was trying to parent, well, I don't know if it would be possible, honestly, because I just didn't know enough about who I was, and I didn't feel like I had any strengths. Like it would be nice. I can look back and say, oh, I was good at some things, but I really felt like, comparatively, I look back at that time as like this very foggy space where I just didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to achieve anything. It was just sort of this cloud. And then I got the diagnosis and it was like, oh, here are the paths. Like, this is how you do this. That's hard. Yeah, that's hard to explain. Like, I think a lot of people have been there, but it's hard to understand or even wrap my own brain around how it
Yeah.
felt. Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about like you coming into yourself as a parent and coming into yourself as a late diagnosed person on the autism spectrum. Where does your partner fit into all this? Like you said you met your partner when you were doing your graduate studies, or
We met when I was 20. Oh my gosh, I'm kind of time blind. I think I was like 23. And so I had graduated college, but I was that was in Philadelphia, and I was sort of learning, I was learning how to date. And we met and got on really well and continued to date. And then around maybe like 3 years in, I was like, I'm thinking about grad school. And at the time I was thinking about applying locally. And he was like, I'll move wherever. So we ended up moving to Colorado together. Yeah. And now
okay.
we've been out here.
Yeah,
So,
and you mentioned that it's a non-monogamous relationship. I
mhm.
can't talk either.
No,
Um
we're just in it together. It's
yes. Oh my god. Thank you for being on this ride with me. Um did that at all, like you said, like maybe he'll meet someone else who will carry the kids and
mhm.
I can, did that factor in at all to your decision as partners to like start a family? Did you have that conversation?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot. And I think what happened, there's lots of different ways to be non-monogamous or poly or however you want to frame it. And I think lots of those ways are good ways. For us, we both had other partners, but we were like each other's we were nesting. We were in the same household together. And neither of us really had other partners that we wanted to have kids with or who wanted to have kids with us.
Mm.
It can become complex. And it was a lot related to like, okay, well, I'm in the best part of my life to do this because otherwise I was coming out of grad school. So otherwise I have to start a profession and then take time off and then hope I don't lose that. Or I could just do it now and then go back to work when I'm ready. And for him, it was kind of age. And it was like, well, we could wait a little longer and see if we find somebody who has the exact same, fits exactly. But usually that's not how people work. Like just in other
Yeah.
relationships, with families, with friends, it's like you don't it's kind of gross to go out and be like, I need someone who fits exactly these boxes, right?
Yeah.
That's like not how you make good relationships, good friendships, good like anything. That's just not. So we were like, well, if it works, it'll work. And then it didn't work. And we were like, okay, I guess this is the option, right? If we both want to have kids, um, this is kind of the time. This is kind of, yeah, how that works. We've both we both are still co-parenting our kiddos and partners together. And then we both have other partners now as well. And he has a child with another person who's sort of, part of our family and part of their family. And I would like to have more kids, but it doesn't seem likely to happen. I did have a recent pregnancy with another partner that ended in a miscarriage, unfortunately, which is pretty awful. But
Yeah.
it's also like now I'm almost 40, and so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Yeah.
poly relationships can be very complex in their structures, but they're also like kind of the same as any other relationship you have with any other friend or anything. So yeah, so we decided to have our kids when we did, largely practically, like
Mhm.
largely just to make it the easiest we possibly could for everybody's like jobs and schedules and needs and ages and yeah.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
definitely answers the question. No, and it does, and it leads into my next thought is because you mentioned you had postpartum depression and
Mhm.
anxiety,
Yeah.
and you had it with both kids,
I
right?
had it with both kids. It was not diagnosed at the time.
Okay.
And then, but like when I talked to providers afterwards, it was like, oh yeah, that's definitely what that was. I also have PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which was
Yes.
diagnosed after my second child. So I got a bunch of diagnoses after my second
Oh, yeah.
child. But knowing all these things, it was like, oh, okay, now we have a clear understanding of what was happening 5 years ago. But it was past. I kind of dealt with it without a lot of support and without medication and without really knowing what was going on. And then later, um, got more resources and information and had better doctors, and it was like, oh, this is what it was. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we've sort of explored on the podcast very, like, we've only had a couple of guests in the LGBTQIA plus
Mhm.
community. I am part of the QIA plus community.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the letters.
Yeah.
But I don't, obviously my episodes focus on my guests, so
Mhm.
I don't really talk a whole lot about it. One area we haven't really talked a lot about, though, is polyamory and
Mhm.
non-monogamous relationships and how it
Yeah.
relates to parenting
Mhm.
and how it relates to the postpartum experience. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what was your support network like in terms of like partners that you had at the time when you were going through some of that?
Yeah. So, just to be transparent, I'm a queer agender human. And I have been for all my life. I think I have to think back actually when I was pregnant, I had just graduated grad school and I didn't date at all during grad school. I was like, it was hard.
Yeah.
And I was really focused on getting through my master's program. I was living with my current co-parent. And I think I had like occasional kind of short-term relation. Like, you date for 6 months and you're like, you're nice, but it's not quite, the fit.
Yeah.
And I think the same, if he was here, I would ask him. But since he's not, I'll just say I think that was the same for him at the time. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. He met his current, he has multiple partners, but the other person with whom he has a kiddo now, he met right after my first son was born. So they weren't in the picture yet. And he might have been dating, but I don't think there was anybody super long term. So when I had my first child, and the pregnancy was relatively outside of the fact that I was trying to write a thesis and like do grad school stuff. It was
Outside of
pretty
that.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I also feel like that's roughly what everyone's doing. Like everyone's doing something, like you're working, you're
Yeah.
whatever. So when I had the baby, I think his mom came out to visit for a little while. I had some friends around, but I didn't really have much of a network.
Okay.
I knew a lot of folks from grad school, but I hadn't really managed to like click hard with anybody. I had one really good friend who I needed to get, when I had my son and we were trying to nurse, we had trouble latching and I had oversupply. And I took him home. We couldn't get him latched. We started bottle feeding. And then I need to go to the hospital to get like a breast pump. And my one friend came over, like literally the one person I knew. It was like 2 days after the baby was born. And my co-parent went to sleep because had been up for like, I don't know, way too long. And she literally sat on the couch and held the baby for like 3 hours while I went to go get the breast pump and come back. And I was like, I was in that postpartum space where you're not really supposed to be up that much yet. But it was just like, so our introduction to, hey, we're home with our baby was pretty crappy. Like
Yeah.
we had a really hard time. I had a postpartum doula who saved my butt. I think the majority of our community or support network when I had my first kiddo was really that I had a doula and then I had a postpartum doula, and they kind of got us through. And this one friend, who doesn't have kids and is childless on purpose and still held my baby for 4 hours so I could do it. So like that was fit. Like I don't want to reduce their efforts because it made a big difference, but we didn't really have a lot of support. I think when the baby was 3 or 4 months, I hired like a teenager to come over occasionally to help. And the postpartum doula did help significantly with like the housework and some of the cooking and stuff but we couldn't afford too much. We just did what we could afford.
Yeah.
But community wise, we didn't have much. We just weren't well established in the community yet. When we had our second baby, we were a little better off, but I like his current partner took our toddler overnight while we went to have the baby and then held him for a while. And I think by that time we had more friends, but I was still not really seeing anyone because I had at that point been a stay-at-home parent with an autistic toddler for an extended period of time. And I nursed and I don't regret it, but I really did. It really ties you to that baby,
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up nursing for 6 years straight just because of the spacing of my babies. They both nursed till they were 4. And then I kind of cut them. I was kind of like, we did a good job, and now I'm done. I really, although I strongly identify with being poly, and I do have other partners now, when my babies were very young, I really didn't, because there was no time to date. I was exhausted. I was dealing with these undiagnosed issues. The I got my periods back right at 4 months with both kiddos, and the undiagnosed dysphoria kicked in, like the premenstrual, which was undiagnosed and unsupported by med. Now I have meds for it, so like now I'm way better off. But like those first like 5 or 6 years as a parent were hard, and I didn't really have a lot of resources, in part because I didn't have time to go create those resources, or to make friends. You have to put in the time to make friends. I joined a couple of parenting groups in the area. I tried to go to the like hospitals, mother circles. I couldn't get my kids out the door really at all, like between naps and stuff. Also a part of autism that is better for me now, but after medication, but was not supported at the time, is a certain kind of inflexibility. Like, we have to do it this way. And most humans, when they are tired, get even more inflexible. And so I was really stuck when my babies were young on sleep and making sure they slept enough. And I was really like overly anxious around them not napping enough, them not eating enough, and just like keeping them alive, basically, which now you look back and you're like, oh, that was really unsupported anxiety. But I was like hyper anxious about just keeping them alive and breathing. And I think it was really hard to get out to some of these social events, because I was like, well, they have to eat at this time, and they have to, sleep at this time. And if they don't sleep enough, we have to go back to the naps. And now I'm like, just chill out about the naps, Danielle. Like, it was fine. They're going to be fine. My co-parent now has a 2.5-year-old. And although I am not like a primary parent for that kiddo, it's been really interesting just to look at like how much I've evolved as a human over the past 10 years. Because it's like, if he doesn't sleep or eat or whatever perfectly one time, it's fine. But if my kid, when they were a baby and I was unsupported, didn't sleep or eat one time, I was like in full panic. And so of course I couldn't get to the hospital for like the breastfeeding mother's circle, or the mommy and me yoga class, or even like there were some moms, like, I don't know what they're called, but like, meet other parents, have potlucks, go to each other's houses, kind of get to know you things.
Just mom groups.
Mom support groups. Even going to I remember trying to go to like the library baby books thing. And like, it was always like, no, he has to nurse that time. No, he has to sleep that time. Like, I just couldn't make it work, because I was very stuck, both from the anxiety and the autism and some other stuff, on it has to be this way. Right. Which is not, you need to be flexible as a parent. And I just could not, I was not in a space where I had any way to be flexible. I wasn't sleeping. I was unmedicated. My co-parent is a fantastic father, but he was working full time in a very demanding job. I was a stay-at-home parent. And it was just like, it was just, I forgot what your original question was.
I did too, but I'm relating to what you're saying. So
yeah. Oh, so our support structure, despite being poly, it should have been better. But we had just moved here. There are cultural differences, I really think, between Colorado and New Jersey. And I think maybe most people would be able to like transcend those pretty easily, but I have just never managed to fit in where I feel like socially fitting in Colorado politeness norms. And I found it really hard to make friends. I've been out here for like 10 years. I still find it hard to make friends. I still find it hard to figure out when people are just being polite versus actually want to get to know you in a way that I did not have trouble with in New Jersey. Because where I grew up, it was close to New York City, and everybody's pretty straightforward. And
I was going to say.
You can tell if people want to be your friend or not. And out here, I'm just like, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know am I being weird if I like ask you to coffee, or are you expecting me to ask you for coffee? Like, I have to have these like really careful thought processes every single time I meet somebody, because I'm like, and it's been a long time. So, so social networking was really hard, and I really didn't have much of a support network when I had my kiddos. Now I feel like it's a little better, but also a lot of my grad school friends have moved, and I'm kind of in this place recently. I was just talking to my partner last night about like, I think one of my 2024 goals has to be to like make new friends, because like a lot of folks have moved, or, have mostly people have moved. It's a little bit like people have started families and are busy, but a lot of it is just like, no, like the people I knew moved and I need to make new connections now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I went in with the assumption that you had other partners at the time. So it was good. It was a good clarifying.
I had a partner in New York. I still have that partner. We've been together for a really long time, but like he wasn't able to help me with a baby,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
What did you find helpful in those times? So you're struggling with, just so you know, I struggle with that like rigid schedule too as a stay-at-home mom.
I'm so much better now.
But I hope that I get a little better with it, but I'm like, nope, we have to get the errands done by this time so that we're home by this time, so that she's eating by this time, napping by this time, yada, yada, yada.
And they're little. It's really important. My kids are also, I don't remember, I'm sorry, how old your kiddo is.
Oh,
but
I have a 1-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Okay. No, the 1-year-old. It's just, I think it's just because the youngest we have now is the 2.5-year-old, and still napping, but it's much more flexible if he has a snack in the car or whatever.
Yeah.
But when they were little, it was like, no, you must nap. You are one, you must nap. It was impossible. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So like, I relate, but I also understand, like, for you, that was like a big trigger. It was a super trigger.
Yeah.
So what did you find? You were not medicated at the time, and you were undiagnosed at the time with your first.
With like everything. Undiagnosed for all the things.
Yeah. So what sort of helped you through, or was it just time?
I think I was really a kind of mental health disaster for probably like the first 3 years. And in some ways, I wish somebody else had picked up on it, but also I don't know that my co-parent was in much better, and I don't want to speak for him, but my sense is that his mental health was not substantially better than mine during that time. Like we were both dealing with significant challenges in different directions, and also with our legitimately challenging kiddos at the time. And also I think that we both got triggered in different ways by parenting, and then would trigger each other. The relationship now is much more solid, but we've had to do a lot of work on like, communication styles. And the way we do it now is we actually like distinctly separate, like some days are my kid days. I am the kid owner, the parenting owner, and some days are his kid days, and he is the parenting owner, and I'm just around, or he's just around. And so we really had to like divide and conquer, because if we both tried to parent, we just like got each other, and we're not good parents. I think that what really helped for me, having the doulas, if you can afford some kind of help, either a postpartum doula or a housekeeper or cooking support or make meals with your friends, or like anything you can do to cut your workload and rest as much as you can. Getting diagnosed for PMDD really helped, because that was a big component of the anxiety that I wasn't aware of at the time. And I'm on an SSRI for that now. There's lots of different treatments though, and you should talk to your doctor about it. But the medication really helped. And probably helped with the postpartum depression and anxiety too, but I wasn't aware that I had it at the time. So, probably like, I remember that the midwives did postpartum depression screenings at the 2-week and the 8-week. And somehow I didn't ping. And I don't know if I just wasn't tired enough yet, or I was like part of autism, especially late diagnosed autism, is masking, which means you're pretending you're okay, even when you're not, but you don't know you're pretending you're okay. So maybe I was masking really hard, and, the diagnostics would have worked. But I also do think like practically there should be more screening for past the 8-week mark.
Well, and the screenings, this is something we've talked, something we've talked about several times on this show, is how it's been the same screening for as long as anyone can remember. And it's so vague. And when you said like, I didn't ping, it's like, and it could just be the day. It could be the day you
I was having a good day.
Like, or masking. And it's the same thing. You're like, well, I don't want to tell them that I'm struggling, because then what are they going to think? So I hate those screenings, but I think that they need to be changed. I think there needs to be more, but so, and again, I have to keep reminding myself that like at the time you didn't recognize it, as PPD and PPA.
No.
But now looking back, you can recognize it. But you
Mm-hmm.
were dealing with a storm of things.
It was a lot of stuff. Like now I
Yeah.
can be like, it was this, and kind of list it out. But at the time it was just this kind of cluster of crap. And I didn't know what was what. I didn't know what was normal either. I'm one of those people who somehow managed to have a baby without ever actually having engaged with babies over much prior to that.
Wow,
Like
yeah.
I had a friend who had a baby literally 6 months before I did, who I'd babysat a little bit for. And most of my other kid experience was like age 2 or 3 and up. I hadn't really, so like I read all these books, but then it's like you're trying to apply it to a real human that you have in front of you. And I was like, I think I know what's normal, quote unquote normal, huge scarce quotes, right? For a normal, for a baby. Yeah. But then if he didn't match normal exactly, I was like, well, is this an okay way to not match normal? Or is this like, he's going to die? Again, anxiety, like postpartum, So it was really, I did not have this nice list of things that I could go through and say, well, is this a real challenge or is it postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, undiagnosed autism, undiagnosed PMDD? It was just like, yeah, like you said, this cluster, the storm of crap that we're just trying to hunker down.
Yeah.
And push through and get out the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. I hate that. And it's the thing that I tell so many new parents that are in the thick of it is it's like, you don't want to hear it, but it's time. It's time. And it's figuring yourself out, figuring your kid out, and figuring out who you are together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sort of segues into where you're at as a parent today. And you have 2 kiddos who are both neurodivergent themselves.
Mm-hmm.
How does your diagnosis and your experiences sort of impact the way that you are parenting your own neurodivergent kiddos?
Yeah. I think that the sort of there's lots of different ways to answer this, but I think the most all-encompassing one is that because I wasn't caught for so long for so many different things, I didn't have a ton of awareness of like how life felt when stuff was good. Mm-hmm. Like when your brain is working pretty okay and you're not mired in anxiety and depression and autistic burnout and sensory processing challenges, all the stuff. Like now I'm at a place where I'm pretty regulated and it's a lot easier to see what's sort of what's a reasonable expectation for your life and what's not, and to say, well, something's wrong. And so really what I've tried to do for my kiddos is bring that awareness of how do you feel? What does it feel like when you feel good? Right? Like, what does it feel like when you feel good as a human being? And how can we get more of that? Because I think a lot of the tools that you need to figure that out were missing for me when I was young. Like you were saying, people of our generation, a lot of us were missed because the way stuff was diagnosed was different and the what they were looking for was different.
Yeah, some of the terminology didn't even exist.
It didn't exist. And so we have a lot more terminology now. We also have a lot more awareness of like different traits for different kinds of people and what tends to pop up. And one of the things that I didn't have when I was a kid was emotional intelligence at all. Like I could tell what other people were feeling and try to, support them, but I didn't know what I was feeling ever. Which is, I think, a lot of the fogginess I talk about when I talk about like my 20s is I didn't know. So we work a lot on emotional intelligence skills and how our bodies feel. And if our bodies don't feel good, in any, whether that's an emotional piece or a physical piece or somatic piece, like how can we, can we talk about that? Can we work on that together? I want them also to have a sense of my job as a parent is to be on their side. And sometimes that doesn't always mean saying yes, obviously. I am a collaborative parent, democratic parent. So I'm not super authoritative in that like quadrant of parenting styles. But we really work to, discuss problems together and come to a solution that everybody is going to be okay with. And I think that I'm only able to do that because of kind of what I went through and understanding my own internalized ableism and my own internalized like shame around, I'm not doing it well enough, right? Which I think most parents end up with this internalized, I'm not doing as well as other people stuff. When you're also disabled in some way, that can be even bigger because I have a nervous system disability.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do things the same as an able-bodied person would. And that doesn't mean I'm less of a good human or like less valuable as a human. I'm still a valuable human, and so are my kids.
Yeah.
And so I really want them to internalize this sense of, even if I do things differently, or I'm holding to, I have different needs, I have different strengths, I have different weaknesses, I'm still a worthwhile human, and I have inherent worth, and I'm going to approach the world like that. So I think all of that kind of stems from the struggles I had when I was, in that birthing, raising, early years phase. We also just handling an 8 and 10-year-old is hugely different than a 1-year-old in terms of their understanding of their self and their values and what they want out of the world, and my ability to, interrogate that with them and support them in how they want to grow, and what's important to them. When they're 1 and they're not talking and not sleeping and, all that kind of stuff, it's wildly different and much, much harder. So we also just do have more support now. Like we've more integrated in our community. We know more people. We have more partners and other family. We have more friends. I feel like I have people I can talk to if stuff gets overwhelming or I don't know how to handle things. And also when I started the Neurodivergent podcast in part because I was trying to find other autistic parents of neurodivergent kids. And so now I know some, right? Now the neurodiversity space online has hugely blossomed through the pandemic and on. And you can't watch TikTok or Instagram or anything without bumping into somebody who's talking about their ADHD or autism or whatever.
Yeah.
Even if they're talking about it wrong and bad, it's still it's there in a way that it wasn't before.
Right.
And that's been huge for me personally because it's so much easier to expect a basic literacy around neurodiversity from humans that you bump into. And if not, to give them resources about it. And same for healthcare professionals. I used to have to approach any new doctor with this kind of are they going to believe me when I tell them I'm autistic? Are they going to be able to take me at my word for the PMDD? Especially when you have hormonal issues as a woman, people are even good doctors, there's this internalized bias against oh, you're just faking it, or doesn't actually hurt as much as you think it does or whatever. And it's no, I'm telling you the truth about my experiences. So, but now I can expect that doctors will have basic neurodiversity knowledge. And if they don't, I feel very confident in moving to the next doctor. Whereas 5 years ago, that was not the case. It was hard to find anyone who had ever met an autistic woman in their life, So yeah, it's a lot better now, but also just having more resources and reaching out to make connections when I felt isolated really, really made a big difference. Yeah.
That's another common theme. It's that's that tale as old as time saying it takes a village. Yeah. And it really does. And it really, really does, which is, I know personally that the polyamorous lifestyle, I wouldn't be able to handle it just because of my own,
it's
I don't have
everybody.
I don't have the mental capacity to do that. I can't juggle that many things.
Yeah.
And that many relationships. That's complicated for me. But I have always been fascinated and intrigued and I see so many benefits to it because it's that village. It's like a self-made village. It's like a self-made community. And especially when you're going through something like mental health struggles or when you're going through parenting, you have a built-in community.
Yeah.
There, which is so nice.
Yeah.
Obviously not every dynamic is the same and not every polyamorous experiences that you're gonna parent the kids all together or whatever, but at least you have partners supporting you and loving you, and I don't know, it's
it
a
really
village.
helps. It really helps. And for me, having romantic or sexual partners is sort of similar, and maintaining all those relationships is sort of similar to how most people I perceive maintain friendships. That some people you see every single day or you talk to every single day. Some people you see once a week. Some people you see once a quarter. Sometimes you don't see them for 10 years. And there's different expectations kind of built into that relationship that you've sort of figured out for each other. I think that how do I say? There are like, I have partners who have these built-in communities, who have multiple partners living with them and bunches of kids living together. And it's much easier if one person needs to like go someplace for work or go to make therapy appointments one day or something, that there's just somebody else around for childcare. And it just makes it a lot more flexible, which is really great. And then I also have experiences where a lot of us are still isolated. Like I have one partner who is in a marriage where both partners are poly, but they're not like out about it because of how their workplaces and being in more conservative workplaces. And so they're not really allowed to access some of the, like, obviously I will help if somebody calls me, but like, I'm not in their house. I'm not like attending their family barbecues. Right. And so the way they can access me is limited. It's really, I think it's just as complex as it is for monogamous people. Like the vision is this great community care model, but in actuality, I have a sister who married a person with a huge extended family. And I don't know, but I suspect she has just as much access to community care sorts of models as I do through my poly, just because there are people around, right? So I do think like poly is one way to do it. And if it works for you, that's cool. I've been poly my whole life, so it works for me really well. But also there are other ways to access this kind of community care support and not feel isolated that don't require sort of being part of the queer community or the poly community or any of this thing. And so, yeah, it really is about how you use the people and not use the people. That's like really, reductive in terms of human relationships. But I mean more how you come together as groups and offer each other support, and how you all model that as part of the community together, rather than the actual structure, like the actual name of the structure that you've created.
Right.
Yeah. I hope that made sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I hope too that like I get like super sensitive that I'm coming off the wrong way too sometimes. So like
I don't think so.
Oh, okay,
I just wanted to clarify.
No, and that's how I felt. That's how I didn't feel like, I don't know. And it's something that I've always been very interested in. I'm very interested in everything. That's just how I am.
Too.
Like I just want to learn about
really
everything.
Cool.
Yeah, people are cool. Relationships are cool. I hate labels. I hate norms. I don't like I believe everything is a construct. That's just who I am as a person. So like, but I've always been, I know that personally right now where I am in my life don't have the capacity to be in a polyamorous relationship because I just don't have that mental capacity. But I find it so beautiful. And because of that capacity to create a community of people that you all just love and care about each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like there's nothing more to it. Like you just like love isn't finite. Like you don't just love one person. You don't love one person the same way you love another person. Yeah. Like, so like I hope that when I asked the question about like support through poly relationships, it wasn't that I was like, oh, I assume that you guys just are like living like,
like a big 70s commune or something.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I got at all.
Okay, good.
I much more was thinking about, or I guess my answer was more for folks listening who are like, have this idea of poly that, it can be like that. And also sometimes it's like, no, you're still alone by yourself with your 2-year-old. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I also think it's more about how you learn to communicate your needs and your wants and talk to people than it is about poly or like monogamy. Yeah. Like the relationship structure, it's more about like the, how do you form relationships with people, which is the root of everything. So
you'd think that there is a very big queer community in Vermont, but being a stay-at-home mom, it's really, really limits my accessibility to the queer community.
I have the exact same problem. And also with the poly community, that there is a good size poly community in my area. And also the culture differences I've never been able to like really get in there the way that I did when I was in Philly. So I don't know. I feel it. It's hard.
It sucks. It sucks. An added question to sort of the relationship and the dynamic with you parenting and all being neurodivergent. Sensory needs are a huge thing.
Yeah.
I can imagine. How do you get your sensory needs met while also meeting your kids' sensory needs?
It's taken a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And also when I was first identified as autistic, I really knew nothing. Like I had never even considered my sensory experience as part of my like mood or like it just wasn't something I ever thought about. So I'm sort of a sensory avoidant kind of person. There are some exceptions because sensory feelings are complicated, but I mostly kind of want to be by myself. I kind of want it quiet, or at least organized noise. Like music is great. Disorganized noise where you don't know what's going to come next. So I can handle loud environments and stuff with some good prep, but it's not where I thrive. I'm also like pretty introverted. So I'm not the most introverted, but I'm like over there on the scale. I have two sensory seekers as children. They're both relatively extroverted, like maybe not way over there on the scale, but like definitely on that side. They like to jump. They like to run. We have trampoline. We have a swing in our house. So part of the answer is that we've set up specific places. They're allowed to make whatever noise they want in their rooms. We're lucky that they each have their own room. And we also have in our basement, they have like a video game console. And then also we literally made a giant hole in our ceiling so that we could hang a swing. But oh my gosh, it was the best decision. And so we try to, make sure they get outside, make sure they have places that they can do the things they need. And we also talk just a lot about sensory needs and make sure they have access to fidgets. And if I see somebody say fidgeting in a way that is not supportive to us as a household, like, drawing on the wall, or this was when they were younger. We don't get any drawing on the wall anymore. But when they were little, like we would have epidemics of a month of people just drawing on the walls all the time. One of my kiddos went through this phase of like trying to like clean the windows when they were little, and it would just like make this, it was, so now they have sort of go-to activities. And if I notice somebody doing something that I'm kind of like, as a householder, I'll say something like, hey, I really see that your body wants to do this. Could we possibly think of another way that would feel good for your body, but it's not this specific thing?
Yeah.
And then for me, I rely a lot on earplugs. I have like 4 different kinds, depending on if I need to be able to still hear the kids through them or if I don't, and kind of ranging up. And I also have like my own bedroom with a closed door that I've set up as sort of my sensory safe space. And the kids know that this is my quiet space. And if they come in and they're loud and I don't care, I'll just let them do whatever. But if they come in and they're loud and I'm like a little overwhelmed, I'll say, I'm feeling very overwhelmed, and can we make this a quiet space since it's my room? And because we've, I think, talked so much about it not being personal, it not being a form of I don't love you or disrespect or any of it, it's literally what I need and what I don't need. It has developed our kind of, I guess, rapport, our communication through talking about that explicitly. And one of my kids, despite being a sensory seeker, does get overwhelmed and have shutdowns. And so for both of them, they know that if they need quiet, they can go in their room or they can come talk to me and be in my room with me in a quiet room. And so they'll take advantage of that. Like they'll come ask for help if they need help, or they'll, go to their own spaces. And then when they're ready to come out, I'll check in and just say, like, do you need anything else to feel okay? Yeah. So it is some sort of, I guess, moderating for me as a parent to say, I noticed that this person is feeling a little overwhelmed. Could we think of another way? To get what you need too. But a lot of it, and I feel like this with the adults I coach too, like people are just not used to being explicit and out about what they need in general, like whether it's a romantic need or a relationship need or a sensory need or whatever. A lot of us feel like we can't say that or it would be rude to say that. And I'm here to say, I mean, I am autistic and direct, but I'm here to say that most of the time when you say, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I love you, but I need some quiet, and then reconnect later when you feel better, right? Engage in that repair and trust. It just makes it easier for everybody to get what they need because, it's pre-existing. It's set up as an expectation, right?
Yeah. And I would assume some of that comes with age with your kiddos and it being modeled for their whole lives.
The modeling is, I think, the most important piece, which is why I'm really glad I did get identified before they were too old, because trying to understand who I am now and model now versus, it was still really hard, but a lot of it is modeling. Yeah.
What a cool sort of advantage you have as a family that, again, like I said before, you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, but you can at least all understand. I'm not, like you said, I'm not telling you that I need my space because I don't love you. Like, you get this, you feel this way sometimes too. Maybe not exactly how I feel it, but I need to be by myself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you guys are all really good self-advocates.
I think it's practice. I think I had to self-advocate because like even once I was medicated and in therapy and doing all the things to get better when they were younger, I hadn't had the resources to even understand what I need to advocate for. Like I just said, I didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know what sensory stuff was. I didn't know anything. Also, when you're 20, you don't know anything. Like, not to reduce all the 20-year-olds out there, but you go out and you have this experience, and then you're like in a whole new world with people of different cultures and different needs. And I couldn't really speak to my experience even because I didn't really understand it. And having words for things, having a shared vocabulary among your people, even if it's different from everybody else's, and talking kind of explicitly and neutrally, right, about sensory needs, or about, like, there's no morality in needing quiet sometimes. There's no, like, shame in needing it to be loud sometimes. Like, those are morally neutral things. And so I think talking about it like, I need this sometimes, and also I want you to feel okay. How do we get both of these needs met, right? And just sort of approach it from this problem solving space of, there's no shame in this, but this is also what's happening, right? So let's fix it. I think that's huge. And I do think that modeling is important. Like, my kids are really good advocates because I model, but also because, like, my youngest has watched her brother model for, two more years at least than her, but has grown up in this space where, we are explicitly saying, hey, I notice that you're feeling really loud, and also it is making your sibling, like, curl up into a corner. Can we let's talk about this, right? It's expected. So I
say that all the time. I love that.
No, I'm really glad.
I do.
I hope it's helpful for folks.
I usually go with one of two questions. And I think the one that I will choose for you, I know we talked a lot about, like, you were going through this storm and of all of these different, like, diagnoses or whatever. I see you as this collection of just extraordinary circumstances and extraordinary, like, aspects that you just, like, I don't know. To me, you just seem like a very, very cool, creative, confident person.
That's
now.
very kind of you.
Well, I mean, from talking to you for an hour and 20 minutes, but I feel like the experiences that you have are so unique that you can offer a perspective from many different avenues that may not have made any sense. But it means that the question that I'm going to ask you is, what would you hope my listeners take away from your story and your episode? If you were to pick, like, one message for them.
Pick one. It's normal for stuff to be hard, or it's normal for us to experience hardship. How's that?
Yeah.
But also, you're never, ever, ever, ever the only one who's experiencing the things you're experiencing. Because you just called me extraordinary, which is really sweet. But also, I work with 20 people a day who are late identified autistic, and many parents who have had not my experience, but a similar kind of. And so, like, yes, my story isn't like the norm of society's story, but also there are plenty of other people like me. And I think that's probably true, regardless of what specific set of lived experiences you have. But there are other people who have similar experiences and therefore could be offering support for you, or, could be part of your social group and could make it's easy to understand cognitively that you're not the only one, but to understand sort of in your heart, like that you're not wrong or bad or flawed for having had hard times or challenging things happen. So finding those people is a really important step. And I hope that, if even I have a bunch of people who've had similar experiences to me, then you definitely do. So just encouraging folks to go out and find if you're listening to this podcast, you're already going in the right direction, right? But to keep finding people who have had similar experiences that you can talk to and form bonds with and support each other and get through those challenging times a little bit more easily. Yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
With every story that I hear.
Yeah.
Well, again, I love it when I get to meet another like-minded person, and it makes saying goodbye really hard, but it makes for a really, really fun experience. So I'm appreciative that you were willing to share your story and you're willing to chat with me, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to connect with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Chelsea. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Danielle, for sharing your story with me. I loved learning and exploring through the lens of neurodiversity as well as the LGBTQIA+ community. Both are subjects that I know will resonate with so many. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at Quiet Connection or at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or by sharing our episodes on social media. You could also consider becoming a Patreon member and gain access to bonus content, ad-free listening, and goodies in the mail once a month. To share your personal journey, you can contact me through my website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.